He's not a white knight hero, that's for sure. Like I said, he's kind of a bottom feeder. He's not the, I think he's a guy who could have been, he's a guy who maybe could have been a Beverly Hills entertainment lawyer and succeeded, but he didn't know how to do it. He could do it, but it just wasn't him. He couldn't really stomach the mendacity of those cases. So he stayed with what he was comfortable with and what he believed in, and that was helping out, you know, like I said, these bottom feeders, these people that really can't help themselves. Like I said, well, one, he works out of the back of his Lincoln, which is very cool. But he also, in this story, you know, Mick Haller, for all the dancing with the system and finagling and deal making, and there's a lot of deal making. That's another thing you find out. 90% of these cases plea out. You go make a deal. Let's get it started. Let's make a deal and get out. It's shifty in that way, you know. It's let's make a deal. It's not just cut and dry. We follow the case through until there's a right or wrong. They're always making deals. 90% of them making deals. So Mick is very street in that way. He is very much a wheeler dealer. If he's good, I don't care if he's riding a bike. He's good. I had to hire one time. He wasn't working out of the back of his Lincoln, but it may have been a truck he was in, and it worked. Only cost me $50, and it was $50 too much. But I was acquitted. I'd met with the director of this, Brad Furman, for another project that I have at my production company, and that he was interested in, and I had seen this movie. And in the meantime, while looking for a director for Lincoln Lawyer, it sort of, a friend of mine who I work with was like, well, what about this guy for Lincoln Lawyer? And it clicked. I was like, that's right. He captured LA wonderfully. He really understood the street aspect. I think he'll get the parts of this movie that have to do with how the system works, the injustices of how it works, the justice of how it works, how it's a slippery slope, the wheeling and dealing part of how the justice system works. And so then I talked to Tom and Gary and said, I want you to meet with this guy about Lincoln Lawyer, and they evidently had a good meeting. Here we are. My ex-wife is Marissa Tomei, who plays Maggie. She's a prosecuting attorney. I was very excited about her being Maggie, and I was glad that Lakeshore and Brad and everyone wanted to go that way. You know, the story's not a huge love story, but the story does have a chance to show how a relationship like that really does work. Prosecutor was married to a defendant. They have a daughter together. They're now divorced, but yet they sort of have that relationship in my mind of like, you know, when they do on some of those late nights end up hooking up, they're probably wondering, whatever went wrong, we're perfect for each other. But then when they wake up in the morning and sober up, they're like, what in the hell am I doing? You know, or at least she is probably. And there's a lot of relationships like that. So to not make that relationship sentimental, to not make that relationship sort of longing, and to not make that relationship one where at the end of the film, you feel like, or you know they're back together, which they're really not. It is more truthful. It's just more realistic. There's a lot of couples like that still have working relationships, are still attracted to each other, but they're not together. So in that can come, you know, Maggie and I understand something about each other that no one else does. And in this instance, in this story, I get into a pinch that she doesn't know the details of, but she knows that if I'm asking her for something, I really need it. There's Ryan Philippe, who's playing Louis Roulet, who I'm defending, and I've had a really good time working with him. We don't know a thing about each other until we meet. Very different than, say, with Maggie or Marissa. We had a past relationship. That was fun to talk about, who we were, who we are. With Louis, it was like, I said, I got my guy, you got your guy. I don't want to know. I want to be surprised by what you do. You be surprised by what I do. Let's rehearse on film. And he was like, yep. So we've come together. And he's very much a pro. I really enjoyed working with him. Bill Macy plays probably my mixed best friend. Frank Levin, he's my private investigator. And he's a ball. He's a lot of fun. I've worked with him briefly before in the film Sahara, but this time we really got to have some good scenes together, to where we got to show our past relationship, what our relationship is now, how much fun we have together. And he's played it so not a moralist, you know. We both sort of are playing guys that have seen it all, you know, so nothing really surprises us. And there's a lot of water under the bridge with he and I, and we kind of enjoy it. Lawrence plays Earl, my driver. It's a guy who probably got busted for stealing something. I said I'd take his case. He didn't have any money. I said, all right, work it off and be my driver. I lost my license anyway. And I'm in the back seat, and if the phone rings, he knows to put the earphones on, because he can't be privy to things I'm talking about, right? So that's our security system. But at the same time, he's privy to a whole lot. He's also turned me on to some great music. And yeah, it's probably good down the line that hopefully no one ever called. If Mick ever gets in trouble, it's probably good if they don't bring Lawrence in and put him on the stand, because he's been privy to a lot of things Mick's gotten away with. John played Val, bail bondsman, who also is at the court. He's another one of those great bottom feeders. He's a guy who's, you know, scrapping across on the, you know, he's not one of the big fish. He's down at the courthouse wheeling and dealing, trying to do deals, you know. And he gets me in on the front, or at least tells me he is, on this case with Roulette, and trying to turns me onto it. And he's a guy who's always coming to me, and probably a whole lot of other lawyers, and saying, hey, I got this case for you, I got this case for you. And they pan out 1 out of 20 times, maybe. And so he's wheeling and dealing, telling me, hey, Mick, I got this Grand Slam case for you, da-da-da-da-da. So get the case, and then, you know, set me up, man. Send them to me, the bail bondsman, and then I get a piece. I get a little cash. And so that's our relationship. He's a guy, one of those guys that's hanging out at the courthouses, looking for an angle, trying to get something started so he can get something out of it. I've worked on a couple of films that came from novels before, and so one thing you have to get is that there's a difference. 500-page novel, 120-page script, double space, whatever. You have to get from A to C and skip B sometimes. There's certain beautiful nuggets in the book that you just aren't going to get in a film. And you shouldn't. That's why it's a film. That's why it's an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes, whatever it is. You don't have time. So what do I like to call? I like to call it like a great, you know, a film's more of a greatest hits version of the mini albums that's in a book. You know, without compressing too much, film still has to have room to breathe. But you have, like I said, you do have to get from A to C sometimes and skip B. And you have to, there's certain little subtle relationships that you have to really look at and go, you know what? That part of that relationship, we got to nix that. Can we fold that into this other relationship that is more primary?